Here I am back talking about Fate The Winx Saga, now having seen all 6 episodes. I thought it would be great to react to what I said in my previous video to see whether I was right in saying that Netflix completely ruined it. Was I wrong about any of the assumptions that I made? Yes and no. It is both better and worse than we could have imagined. Probably the most important thing to take away from my last video is that if Fate The Winx Saga managed to completely nail the friendship dynamic between the girls, then I would forgive it of all wrongs. I mean, okay, maybe not the whitewashing, but all other wrongs would be forgiven. Instead, they couldn't have got the friendship more wrong if they tried. Across the 6-hour runtime, all 5 girls are probably together for about 6 minutes. Yeah, 1% of the whole time. You have to watch 3 hours and 40 minutes before you get the first group hug, and even then, Stella isn't a part of it, so I'm not sure it even counts. The Winx Club would not stand for this. For the show, the girls are usually divided up, so Bloom actually spends probably more time with Beatrix than any of the Winx girls. Stella spends a lot of time with Sky and Riven and the other specialists. Aisha I lost track of in the second half of the series, which leaves Musa and Terra to take up largely the friendship bond of the show. So it's my worst fear in that everything that we saw in the trailer, those 1-second clips, is actually just a compilation of every time the girls are on screen as an ensemble unit, and the rest of the time they're not close. I'd go so far to say that none of the girls are really friends besides Musa and Terra. It made me laugh every time that Terra said something to Bloom along the lines of, "We're your friends, you can trust us," because they don't share anything besides a tenancy agreement. Their group chat name is just Winx Suite, which is what their rooms are called. The only thing they bond over is the mutual use of a kitchen, and it makes me want to weep. Seriously, I hate it here. The girls should be hugging, high-fiving, using their powers together in battle. That was the kind of stuff that I wanted to see. Apart from Stella, who is repeating a year, all of the girls are new to Althea. They're studying at the same time. So in some senses, they all need to be initiated in the same way that Bloom does. You'd think that this would mean that they'd want to bond. They're in the same boat after all, but they just close off. Aisha's personality is solely based on the fact that she likes to swim and does this twice a day, which takes her out of group scenarios. Musa spends most of the time with her headphones in because she doesn't want to have to listen to everybody else's thoughts. Terra goes off to the greenhouse to spend time with her dad, who works there, and Stella's too busy thinking about ways to get Bloom killed after she speaks to Sky. I can only hope in the next series of the show that the girls bond, and it's going to be unfortunate that I think that bonding will take place in between season 1 and 2, so we won't actually get to see them develop any relationship with each other. But I am hopeful that one of the penultimate scenes of the entire show was all 5 girls going back to Earth with Bloom to spend time with her adoptive parents, but it was not the BFFs that we deserved. So with the friendship well and truly ruined, onto the romance. And oh boy, I was absolutely living for the romance between Musa and Sam, Terra's brother. Yeah, my bad. It turns out that he was the guy that Musa was seen making out with in the trailers. I don't think this is my fault because half of the male cast look like the same dark-haired white boy, so was it really surprising not to be able to tell them apart? Sam is an earth fairy, and that's something that I actually quite appreciated about the show, that it wasn't a gender binary in terms of fairies, witches, and specialists. You got to see girls doing the specialist role and boys being the fairies, so we like that progressive step for sure. Sam is really sweet and soft-natured, exactly like Flora was in the original TV show, so am I going to consider this like a gender bend? The fact that he was meant for Musa I thought was perfect. I think it was exactly the kind of relationship I wanted to see Musa in when I was watching the show as a kid. It's the love she deserves, someone sweet who pays attention to her, who makes her feel happy and she never has to question whether or not he likes her. Musa's powers means that she has to overhear the thoughts and emotions of everyone around her. She finds this often overwhelming, so uses her headphones as an escape. When she takes them off and is around Sam, the music that she hears is this soft melody, and it's a kind of peace that she probably hasn't felt since her mum was alive. I think it's absolutely adorable when they connect, and they have the sweetest little smiles whenever they're around each other, so it's exactly the kind of lightness that this show needed. The conflict of their relationship is, of course, Terra. Musa thinks it's going to be a big deal to have to break the whole "I'm dating my best friend's brother," but it turns out that Terra's actually really chill with it. She'd way prefer that you tell her the truth than lie to her, and if anything, now she can see Musa as a sister. We love that non-toxic energy from Terra. Musa and Riven get one scene together in the whole show, and when I say it was my favourite minute of the show ever, the chemistry between them is just so good. Like, the writers managed to perfectly capture their disdain and their interest in each other at once. The two actors, I think, had so much chemistry as well that I was kind of rooting for Sam to die at the end. Yeah, I thought maybe that kind of death of her first love would make Musa really bitter and push her towards Riven, which I know is really messy and probably not great, But Musa and Riven, they were doing something. They did something. My hopes for the relationship between Terra and Dane were sadly misplaced. Terra definitely did have a crush on him as suspected from her adorable little smiles, but he was way too busy pining after Riven and later Beatrix to notice her. While I did really enjoy the canon LGBT rep on screen, Dane really mistreats Terra halfway through the series, and so I have to bin him. Those are the rules. If you make Terra cry, you are garbage. Dane, Beatrix and Riven by the end of the series almost act like the reboot's version of Icy, Stormy and Darcy. They are a slightly morally ambiguous evil trio. Beatrix has both boys wrapped around her finger in a polyamorous relationship, and Riven's participation in this scares me because he is probably a little bit bi-curious but also homophobic. And that is a very toxic and dangerous combination for him to have. So I'm very much expecting a negative mental health spiral for Riven in the second season. I'm calling it now. Everything about the Stella, Bloom and Sky love triangle that I said in my last video, I manifested in the worst way possible. Stella spends the first half of the series keeping Sky on a leash and punishing Bloom if she even breathes the same air as him. Stella's characterization is really cold and catty, and this is later reasoned out by the fact that she has a raging cow of a mother who seeks to control her power in a really negative way. As we know from Bloom's notes, fairy magic is fueled by emotions, and while positive emotions provide a stable and solid foundation, it's also a rather slow method, and so it's easier to draw power from negative emotions, which is what Stella's been doing this entire time. It means she has way less control over her powers than others, and caused her to blind her last roommate. Sky's the only one to really know the truth about that. He is Stella's whole support system, and they dated before the events of the first season, but get back together. So while Sky doesn't date Stella and Bloom at the same time, he's simultaneously facilitating her codependent nature and also encouraging her to rely on other people. He's being there for her, but in a really superficial way that isn't really taking the time to understand how she's truly feeling. Probably because she also isn't being honest with herself, but their whole relationship is a mess. Anytime that Sky is with Stella on screen, I never got the sense that he genuinely cared about her. She seemed like a burden, someone that he didn't want hanging around her room, and he would have much preferred to spend time with Bloom. The two girls have this horrible rivalry between them. Whenever they're talking to Sky about each other, they're like, "Oh, I can tell Bloom is your type," or "Me and Stella have that in common, I guess that's why you like me." It's said in a joking way, but then in Stella's case it's like, yeah, no, don't go there. Halfway through the season, Stella's mum comes to pick her up from the school because she's disappointed in how her power rehabilitation has been going under the guidance of the headmistress. So Stella dips, but then later comes back because she realises that her mum is being horrible and turns herself invisible. So she's still staying in the Winx suite, but no one but Musa knows that she's there because she can read the emotions in the room. And the whole purpose of her leaving and then coming back didn't really add anything to the show because the girls didn't really care enough about her to really notice. Apart from Terra, who was filling her room with plants and wishing that she was going to get insulted by Stella. I guess insults are her love language? Bloom and Sky together, separate from the Stella love triangle. Okay, yeah, I'll take it. Oh, I didn't mention the fact that Bloom and Sky's first kiss is actually drug-based. Yeah, she's trying to drug him in order to distract him and let her escape. Sky is actually relatively okay with this when he wakes up. He's like, "You might have drugged me, but you're cute, so we'll let it slide this time." Water under the bridge. In terms of characters, I thought that Musa and Terra were the most interesting in the show, which I thought makes a complete change from the cartoon when they're often more in the background. I was really impressed that they still managed to weave Musa's backstory in about her mother dying, and it's made even more intense with her empathic powers because it means that Musa not only saw her mum dying but had to feel it right along with her, and this becomes one of her big character growth moments by the end of the series. As a Flora replacement, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about Terra. I kind of went in the most reserved about her. I didn't know if I would resent her for being the reason that my strawberry flower princess wasn't in the show. But it turns out the exact opposite happened, and I loved Terra from the minute she gave Musa a friendship cactus and tried to eat her own hair. I think in some ways she was the most complex character because she was insecure and they were showing you rather than telling you about it. I think Musa could have been a better friend to her, being able to read her emotions to offer her some support in moments where she wasn't feeling her best. And that was something that was truly missing from the show. Like, Terra was struggling often, especially when Dane rejected her and when she faces this bullying from Riven. It's like they had the perfect opportunity to build a friendship by supporting each other in those situations, which isn't to say that I'm not extremely proud of Terra being able to stand up for herself. And she even has this albeit cringy moment with her brother and dad where she's like, no, I will handle Dane. He's been a jerk and I will tell him so. It's not like her insecurities mean that she can't protect herself. In fact, she will choke you if you come for her, with plants, obviously. I felt like Bloom was a little bit of a blank canvas throughout the show. I think her arc is the most obvious. and maybe therefore not that interesting. They've changed her backstory quite a bit from the cartoon, and I found it a little bit hard to follow because there were so many like doubling back on what we already knew or changing details. So by the end I was like, wait, what's going on? What war crime has been committed? Who are Bloom's real parents? Probably the thing that I'm most disappointed about is the characterization of Beatrix. Yeah, she was evil from the very beginning. They try and have these like oddly self-aware moments between Riven and Beatrix where they're both talking about the fact that you can be nerdy, but you can also like take drugs and wanting to be nuanced when in fact they're not actually nuanced at all, they're just mean. But I did like how Beatrix and Bloom were so much more reasonably interwoven than Bloom and Icy ever were. The new lore for this show is that Bloom and Beatrix were both born in a town called Astadel. It was a settlement for blood witches who had stolen Bloom from her true parents because they wanted to capture the Dragonfire. Along with the witches, who are kind of like an ancient evil, we've got the Burnt Ones, who are the creatures that we see on screen, the kind of Stranger Things Demogorgon-esque thing that poisons everyone they touch and is out on a killing spree. They also inhabit Astadel when Bloom was a baby. In 2004, which I thought was an incredibly cute detail because that's when Winx Club first aired, so to think that Bloom was also born in that year in the show, it's just a cute little nod to the original. In 2004, the headmistress of Althea at that point, called Rosalind, decided that it would be a great idea to destroy Astadel in order to kill both the witches and the Burnt Ones at one go. She didn't tell anybody else that there were also innocents living there, like Bloom. So they perform this massive massacre, and the people that said, that actually doesn't sound right, feel responsible. Those people are the current head teachers in present day of Althea, Farah and Saul. There's also another guy called Andreas, who is the king of Heraklion and Sky's father, who was on the same side as Rosalind. And when Andreas explains to Saul what Rosalind has done, they battle and Saul thinks that he's killed him. But what actually happened is that Rosalind stole Bloom and gave her to an Earth family, and she kept Beatrice and gave her to Andreas to raise, in secret because he wasn't actually dead. Are you following this? Is anyone following this? After all has happened, Farah and Saul realised that Rosalind was corrupt, so capture her and keep her in a cryogenic dungeon in the base of Althea. Bloom and Beatrix, now 16 years old and wanting to know what happened to them, Beatrix has a mission from the very beginning to set Rosalind free, and Bloom wants to help her with this when she realises that she could also benefit from hearing from Rosalind after getting a dream when she unlocks her Dragonfire powers that shows Rosalind's face. She does end up getting released and coaches Bloom a little bit. Bloom and Beatrix get the answers that they desire, and Bloom is able to unlock this ancient Dragonfire magic that allows her to transform in battle. So we didn't think we'd get a transformation sequence, but we did. As gorgeous as something live action can be, the fire is all swirling around her arms and legs, and I was thinking, new outfit, new outfit, new outfit, but no. She does get wings though, these kind of net wings that are made of fire, and at first they're like a classic butterfly wing shape, but then after she comes out of this transformation sequence, they just turn into these little like bat wing things behind her while she's fighting, and immediately disappear once she's vanquished all the foes. So wings. I guess that's something that we can tick off the would have wanted for this series, which means we can only assume that the wings that are in the opening sequence of the show are the wings for the other girls. By the end of the series, Rosalind, now back in power, brings Andreas out and is like, look, he wasn't dead. And now Saul is going to be imprisoned for his attempted murder, and Rosalind wants to take over the head teachership of Althea. She actually kills Farah. Was that entirely necessary? Could she not have like done her a solid and put her in a cryogenic sleep as well? And this is when all of the other girls are back on Earth, by the way, so they have no idea what's happened. They've just come back to Althea, see a completely different woman there, and Beatrix like standing beside them as well. Like, I guess this school is evil now. What else? What else? The outfits, they were kind of bad, but they were also kind of good. Like, I was living for all of the knits that the girls were wearing. Like, there were some quite nice jumper pieces. I think Musa had the most fun wardrobe. Stella, I think the more pink she wore, the more she felt like her normal self. So I liked that. And everyone walks around wearing a leather jacket like they're part of the Mortal Instruments. Scenes between Bloom and Sky were very much giving me Clary and Jace vibes. So those are my thoughts on Fate the Winx Saga. On its own, completely separate from the Winx Club and every like value that that show has. Would I say that this is enjoyable? Yeah, okay. I enjoyed myself, I enjoyed watching it. Did I like it as a reboot of the Winx Club? No, not at all. So I would suggest very much going in with low expectations if you watch the Winx Club. If anything, the fact that this is only 6 episodes is actually a saving grace because it means that I didn't actually have to dedicate very much time to it in order to consume it. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Fate the Winx Saga, and I'll see you next time.